Welcome to another session of the Rousseau Report. I'm your host, Dennis Rousseau. As it's been a few months, I thought this would be a good time to provide a market update detailing what's going on in our industry. So let's get started with the global economy, the driver of our aircraft markets. And as such, we're going to touch upon our illustrious U.S. administration, who are screwing things up left and right. Yellen recently issued a statement that the U.S. is doing extremely well economically, with continued solid job growth creation, inflation moving down, robust consumer spending. Now dig this. She then followed with, "I'm not anticipating a downturn in the economy and the U.S. banking system remains sound." Seriously? That is a joke, correct? Heartland Tri-State Bank in Kansas just shut their doors, becoming the latest financial institution to crash under Biden's current economic policies. The fifth bank closure this year. Federal spending jumped from $4.5 trillion in 2019 to $6.3 trillion in 2023, a 40% increase in 3 years. And that adds to the federal debt that currently stands at $32.3 trillion, and guess when this 40% increase took place? You got it, the last 3 years. And we have nothing to show for it, except politicians reaping millions in bribes and payoffs. To be clear, I don't believe anyone has a problem with government spending. The problem is with the abuse and waste of it. We're experiencing record high inflation, the highest in 40 years. The reason? Rising interest rates, banking segment collapse, and Biden spending. Inflation for the month of May came in at a rate of 4%, and they immediately lied and said that inflation has fallen by more than half. In reality, inflation is increasing, but the rate at which it's increasing slowed. It's like compound interest. It just keeps adding up. While annual inflation grew at 4% in May, that was on top of an annual rate of 8.6%. So over the past 2 years, inflation has been up 13%. Core CPI, which doesn't count food and energy, is reported at 6%. Add those two components into the mix, and we're easily over 20%. Let's revisit some of the fundamentals that affect our aircraft markets and are directly contributing to increased inventory and trickling sales. In our February market summary, we reported on the number of layoffs across all industries, and this is what it looked like. The depiction on the left is from January and February. Now let's view March through the end of May. 3 months. Add them together. I don't see job creation. And by the way, this only depicts layoffs greater than 500, and layoffs are a response to market forces and reduced demand. In February, the government told us that 517,000 jobs were created in January. That's a lie and didn't happen. The raw unadjusted number shows that the U.S. economy actually lost 2.5 million jobs. But after the D.C. bureaucrats were done with their adjustments, it magically becomes a gain of 517,000. There were over 2,900 commercial Chapter 11 bankruptcies filed in the first half of 23, compared to 1,800 for the same period last year. Yellow Freight, a 99-year-old company headquartered in Nashville, employs some 30,000 workers, just announced they were shutting down regular operations and will probably join the 2,900 bankruptcies. That's 30,000 people. The average used car buyer borrowed 125% of the value of the car, leaving them owing more than its market value. In other words, they're upside down. Sounds eerily similar to our aircraft markets over the last 18 months, which we'll get to in a minute. Banks are tightening lending standards for loans, a reliable leading indicator for a recession. They don't want to make new loans because defaults are on the rise. As of June, U.S. consumers had over $1 trillion in credit card debt. We saw a similar rise in 2008. At the end of Q1 23, a record 963 million square feet of U.S. office space was unoccupied. 5 out of 10 office buildings are at risk of default each month, which of course pushes building valuations to a low. Average office vacancy rates are pushing 50% across the U.S., and that doesn't include new space under construction. And if you think these 3 cities are the only ones being affected, every city in the U.S. is being affected with exorbitant vacancy rates. Oil is another economic driver. In 2018, the U.S. became a net petroleum exporter for the first time in 70 years. Last August, Biden begged the Saudis to increase oil output. Instead, they lowered production. 1 year hence, they announced another million barrel per day cut to boost oil prices. That's 2 million barrels per day taken from the system. And then Biden has the audacity to say it will not affect prices at the pump. High oil prices fuel inflation. Our country's backup oil storage is called the Strategic Petroleum Reserve to be used in case of emergencies. There were 638 million barrels available in January 21. 2.5 years later, there were 347 million, almost 50% lower, as Biden was selling off our reserves, destroying our energy independence. Now, to top it all off, consider this. This affects all of us. Kansas wheat farmers will reap their smallest harvest in 60 years. And lest we forget, wheat is one of the world's most important plants, used in flour, bread, pasta, crackers, and the list goes on. Well, the shortage goes from farmers to consumers. The U.S. beef cow herd is the smallest since 1962. Florida's orange harvest is over 50% lower than last year. 90% of Georgia's peach crop has been destroyed in 23. Manufacturing has contracted for 7 straight months. Are we in a recession? GDP has been negative for 4 of the past 5 quarters. And a recession is defined as 2 consecutive quarters of negative growth, which indicates we are and have been in a recession, as we were in 2021 and 2022, until the administration changed the meaning of it. We've had 4 consecutive months of negative GDP, but somehow they want to change Webster's definition. And just a week ago, I read that the U.S. economy, surprisingly, accelerated to 2.4% annual growth from April through June, showing continued resilience in the face of steadily higher interest rates. Ugh. Is there a corollary between all this economic data and business jet markets? Absolutely. Let's look at history, which tends to paint a perfect picture as it's not clouded with opinion or conjecture. First off, during a run-up, you'll actually see the inverse of normal markets, where transactions exceed the number of aircraft coming on the market. Then shortly thereafter, the correction sets in, which is where we are currently. In 2005, we saw an unprecedented run-up in pre-owned prices, as demonstrated by this 2005 Challenger 300 that sold new for around $16 million. In 2007, the price had shot up to $23.6 million in the pre-owned markets, and banks were financing the whole thing, losing hundreds of millions in the process. By 2008, we began to see a correction, but no one paid attention. The exact same scenario that's playing out now. The general consensus was the market would continue in its inflated state. Then came the consummate crash, where in this particular case, a 60% drop. Market prices settled, then normalized to around 7% depreciation per year for the next 10 years. Then the pandemic and markets went crazy again. The price run-up was not as significant as what happened in 2007, but prices did inflate, and now we're seeing market dynamics that suggest a correction. But keep in mind, when we select aircraft to use in these presentations, we need sales data for each year for the specific year model in order to generate a clear, concise picture of year-over-year depreciation. So we're not picking on a specific model. A 2010 Challenger 605, for the first 10 years, the aircraft showed an average 10% rate of depreciation based on average pre-owned selling prices. And yes, some models depreciate more than others. Now, similar to cars, the first few years of an in-service aircraft is when you're going to take the biggest hit from depreciation. And generally, you're looking at 50% in the first 5 to 7 years, again, depending on the model. From 2021 to 2022, inventory decreased and buyers were willing to pay 30 and 40% more than the aircraft value. 2010 Challenger 605s that sold for $7.9 million in 2021 sold for $15.3 in 22. Therein the difference between value is seen in 2021 and selling price in 22. Come time of resale, this owner is going to take a bath. Inventory is now increasing as our days on the market, and it doesn't matter the aircraft model. So let's stay with the 605. There were 9 available aircraft with an average 68 days on the market in June of 22, compared to 21 currently on the market, and an average 110 days on the market. Hawker 800 XP went from 15 last year to 46 this year. The G200 from 6 to 28, and the list goes on. In Q2 2023, there were 187 price reductions. Same time last year, there were 13. Case in point, a 2008 Challenger 605 came on the market in March with an ask price of $13.4. The same ask price when it was on the market in 2014. AircraftPost value, or ACPV, $8 million. Overpriced? Yes. 3 months later, ask was reduced to 11.7, and just this month it was lowered again to 10.7. And there's a major 192-month airframe inspection coming due next year. Another data point we use internally helps us judge where the markets are and where they're about to go. I mentioned price cuts earlier. What do they actually tell us? If we look at the last 6 and 12 months of pre-owned sales, the facts or the numbers lead us down the yellow brick road without Toto. Case in point, look at the current ask price and the row just below that shows us what the specific year model was selling for over the last 12 months. So yes, ask prices are coming down. Now the row just below the average selling price shows us the ACPV, and there's still a huge discrepancy. However, as we witness a decline in the ask prices, we'll also see a corresponding slide in selling prices. Now I realize that a few may view our values as out of touch. Well, let's not forget whence we came prior to the run-up. Aircraft are depreciating assets with a predefined life. It's that simple. Are new aircraft markets being hit as well? I'm sure a couple of the OEMs are thankful for fractionals. The Challenger 650 had its best years for entry into service in 2016 and 2018. First half of 2023, Bombardier delivered 4 Challenger 650s into service, with 3 going to NetJets. Cessna delivered 10 Longitudes, with 6 going to NetJets. And they also took delivery of the only Global 5500 delivered in 2023. At the end of the day, when we compare the number of deliveries for the first half of 23 to the totals for each year past, the results would suggest a correction in new aircraft deliveries as well. As a final note, I read something recently that resonated as we were putting together this narrative that I'd like to share with you. Everyone chasing a speculative bubble higher will get hurt. Everyone counting on a greater fool to buy an overvalued asset will get hurt. As all credit-fueled asset bubbles pop and all credit-fueled business cycle expansions roll over into contraction, as marginal borrowers and lenders go bust. For the Rousseau Report, I'm Dennis Rousseau. See you next time.